the mindset of having to engineer an orchestra?
Yeah, I think we did the string session for Trust, which was a big TV show. Did with James. Will Malone arrangements. That it was great, and it was like, I think it was a £70,000 day.
Whoa. Right, well, Cameron Craig.
Hello.
Welcome to Kredd. So, Cameron, your list of credits is impressive to say the least, including a few Grammys thrown in there as well. And I want to talk about a few of the projects you've been on, particularly quite interested in your extensive work with orchestras as well, because that is not something that most musicians come across, particularly these days with budgets and what have you, and also like the skill set of working with an orchestra. But I want to take you way back to the beginning. And a simple question, but it's a big one. Why music?
Well, big question. I was, like a lot of people, I think they end up in, especially on my side of the glass, started off in bands and whatnot. And, and I ended up being the guy to, organise the PA and get things sorted and do all that.
Yeah.
So I guess it was a fairly natural progression from there. And, got a job in a studio fairly early on and realised that I was more appreciated on this side of the glass than the other. So kept going that way, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what did you play when you were starting in bands?
I played guitar very badly.
I thought you were going to say you were the bass player, because it's normally the bass player who has to do all the organising.
No.
So how did you start in the studio? Was it just one of those things where you just knocked on the door and said, "I'll come and work, make tea"?
Pretty much. I went. I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, and I wrote to pretty much every studio in Melbourne, looking for a job, as you do, and didn't. I went and saw one studio, and still no response from that, and then went and worked in a music shop for a few months.
Okay.
And he was an old musician. Yeah. And he knew a few people. He knew I wanted to get in the studio, so he was ringing around and things like that. And that one place that I went back to had a change of management.
Right.
In the meantime. So they were sort of aware of me, even though I realised later on that I went and saw the accounts lady. I didn't see anyone involved in the actual studio.
Brilliant.
So yeah, then just got a job at that studio called Flagstaff in Melbourne, and that was bought out by a bigger studio, which at the time was called AAV, which then became Metropolis Melbourne.
Right. Okay.
But I went freelance very early on.
Right.
So, we kind of several studios got basically the studio I was in, Flagstaff, and that was the AAV was a big sort of multi-studio kind of complex. They already had a lot of engineers, and then adding a couple more into the mix wasn't going to be fruitful. So
or popular with the other engineers as well.
Yeah. Actually, I'm still friends with a lot of the other engineers, but it was just quite competitive in getting the gigs. So I'd sort of been approached by a few of the other studios, but didn't really want to go anywhere else. But so I went freelance instead.
Right. Okay.
So, about 21, I think I was.
Blimey. Okay. Well, we'll come back to freelance in a second. But when you started at the studio, so obviously you got into Flagstaff. Did you have any experience of recording techniques, the basics of engineering, or did you pick it up as like
no,
assisting?
Absolutely none.
Right.
So, like I said, I might organise PAs. And I had another friend that was quite good at all that anyway. So, I knew where to plug a microphone in, but that was probably about it. And looking back on it, I was probably engineering within probably a couple of months.
Right. Okay. Wow.
I thought it was a long time at the time. But, looking back on it, I'm thinking, oh my God. But I literally did just copy what my boss did. I said, he pushes this button down and this button down, and then you record you doing that, and you turn those things up. I literally, I had no idea what each bit did. But I just literally mimicked him enough to be able to get by. So ended up progressing quite quickly. So
well, I mean, 2 months is really quick. I know you said, as a late teens, you're like, this is taking forever, but I mean, 2 months to get your first sort of like, I am now engineering it. I'm not shadowing and copying, but that's
well, no, I did that for quite a few years as well. But it was like I was very, very lucky in the studio I started in. The manager engineer was very well established and looking to sort of he wanted to train somebody rather than have me sit there and just kind of try and take it in. He was very much, I'm going to train you.
Right.
So I learned early on. He sort of like something was out of phase. He'd be switching the phase and going, see, this is what it does. That's
that way did it.
Just little things like that. Just kind of kept accelerated my progress. Quite significantly, I think. So.
Yeah, I mean that sort of hands-on, seeing what, even though you might not understand. Okay, he's turning this up. I'm not sure why, but it's what you do. But then obviously over time you could then experience.
Like I say, that combined with all right, this is why I'm pushing this button down. That was very very, very helpful. And it got to the point where I would have hated me as an assistant, because I was literally probably 2 feet away from him, like in a chair, literally behind him. And because he's a manager as well, he'd quite often just have to go and take calls and whatnot. So even we were sort of quite tight knit in those first couple of years. And somebody come to the door and just go, "There's a call." He'd just get up and go.
Right.
He could be in the middle of a drop-in or whatever, and because I'd be in the chair, it's the moment he was out of it.
Brilliant.
So poor singer could, look, sort of be singing away, and he'd be dropping in, and then he'd look up, and I'd be dropping it out. It's kind of like
he's thinking, is that a really bad take? Was it? I thought it was quite good. I didn't realise it was that bad.
So it was very good, and that sort of upbringing, because I was like, he'd leave and he'd sort of come back again and do other things, and get to the point where he'd just stop coming back. And because a lot of the time we started off doing jingles, so
right, okay,
a lot of it was very quick, and you have to get on. He'd started off and go and take some calls, and I'd finish the session, and then he'd come back and mix it, or Kind of...
But that's a great way to build up the experience, isn't it? As well, obviously, if you're having to do things quickly as well, so you need to learn quickly to realise it within that time frame as well, So then going freelance, obviously, because you've got this job now at Flagstaff, and then going freelance at 21, that's at the age of 21, that's the sort of thing we do anyway. You go, brilliant, it doesn't matter. But obviously, if you look back at it, you go, wow, I'm leaving a job to go freelance at the age of 21. That's brave.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think when you're in that situation, you don't didn't really think about it at all. I knew I had one record that I know they wanted me to do, so I used that as my starting point, and did that record, and then just sort of carried on. It was it's a rocky road, but I didn't really. Not that I didn't think about it, but I just didn't. You don't. Looking back on it, you just think, "Oh my God, what was I doing?" You just do it.
Well, exactly. I
was going to say, moving to England was one thing that made me look back on all that and realise what I'd done. So because I had a bit of time to think when I first arrived here. So
what prompted the move across?
Well, I'd sort of I'd kind of got to where I could go there.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's it was quite a tight knit little community, and I didn't see anything dramatic happening or changing in the hierarchy of that community
mm-hmm.
without doing something drastic. So I did something drastic.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I mean, it is quite a long way to go.
Yeah, my brother lived here, so he
Okay.
was so I had somewhere to live at least when I got here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but it was actually really sort of probably preferred to go to LA because I knew people in LA
Mm-hmm.
in the business. I didn't know anyone here.
Right. Okay.
In some ways, I was quite intimidated by a lot of English productions and English engineers because they're looking from afar, they were very, very creative and very interesting, which is a hard thing to qualify, whereas American engineers were very precise and very, very, you did it by the rules there, and it all worked out. So, and at the time, I was kind of more like that than
right. Okay.
that I ended up being. But so I was, slightly intimidated with the floods and the whatnot of this world in the UK. So
yeah, I suppose it's that sort of the records that these people are attached to as well, and then it's probably that mythical process that they're all incredibly creative and not like the Capital Sound guys in LA. It's like they're English. They're crazy.
It's very hard to compete with that, isn't it? Because you either think like that or you don't.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So when you came over to England, obviously you had your reputation in Australia, and you said, you take it as far as you could within that sort of tight-knit confines in the hierarchy. So then how did you then start in the UK then? How did you get plug back in, but being in the UK?
Well, I didn't work for about a year.
Right.
It was hard. Yeah, it was sort of what sort of drew me over here was that the whole Britpop thing was happening at the time, and that was quite exciting and stuff like that. I didn't dawn on me for a second that I wasn't English and wouldn't necessarily fit in. But I ended up working with a lot of those people that always wanted to. So
yeah.
After the initial wave, but even so, I got to work with them. But it was just hard. I just kind of a friend of mine came over. We did a bit of demoing at one studio, and I ended up. There's obviously been some talking going on. He sort of said, "Oh, you're that Cameron." I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay." Somebody been talking about me, and I ended up just doing a little bit of freelance work at that studio.
Right.
Island Records did a lot of work there.
Okay.
So ended up doing a record with Cath Coffee, and that just sort of, and then I started filling in at the Fallout Shelter for when,
of course, yeah.
From their guy couldn't do it there, so
right.
That's why the early era of UK resume is very island based.
Yeah, yeah.
I was doing a lot of work there.
But I mean that's a good place to sort of plug into, though, isn't it? Because not only is it an interesting studio, it's got the mythology of Marley and the echo chamber with the you pull with the speaker at the top of the chimney and all that. But obviously there's a lot of traffic going through because obviously it's all the island acts. So that's actually that's kind of then you start to, I presume you then start to, oh, you're that Cameron guy, and you're like, yes, I am, and I've just done this, and then I've done this record.
Yeah, and then sort of that was only one place, and I met, I was sort of managed very briefly for a little while, and met another, like a writer, I guess he was.
Mm-hmm.
He was in a band at the time, and he was working out of a studio called Chiswick Reach, which was this funny little valve studio that Dick Carey built, and just really had to kind of relearn everything I'd done, because nothing. I'd come from the world of SSLs and kind of typical miking, and you just sort of go into that place and none of those things work. You just set up as you normally would, and it just sounded rubbish. So I just had to rethink what I was doing, which was good. Just sent me off down a path that was a very different one to where I'd been before. So
I suppose that's because you obviously you learn that way of doing it. The SSL way. This is how we do it, and then you have to rethink your process by exploring. Okay, well, why does it sound shit? So again, it's like then instead of just staying on that path, this is how we do it. You're going to have to then adapt your practice. And did you think did that kind of way of thinking, did that fit in with this more sort of the Britpop sound at that time, or the artists were maybe a little bit less, I don't want to do it the normal way?
Well, I met a chap called Pete Davis there, and that's where I met James Lavelle. So they were very up for just doing things very differently. So, and that was a studio that would lend itself to that. I think I met Pete when he was just making a load of. He'd just make up a load of loops and stuff like that. He was a programmer essentially, so he'd just record a lot of drums. So we were just doing crazy things like, we could put drums through wah-wah pedals because we could. It was kind of that, just that very wild sort of experimentation, because they were just loops. Didn't really matter.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That
didn't work. Okay, we just can move on. It was nothing. Which was great, and then that set me up quite well for working with James. So he was working with a Japanese engineer called Kudo at the time, who actually came down to do the session.
Right.
He took one look at the studio and went, maybe you should do this one, because it was unique, let's say.
Brilliant.
And then we just got on well and ended up working together for a while. So.
Yeah, it's quite. It's quite
20 years.
Yeah, I was going to say it's quite extensive. Your work with Uncle with James. Why do you think that relationship has worked? Because that's one of the things that a lot of people. It's sort of that. As I said to you before when we've spoken about this, there is quite a culture of insular music listening and consumption. Particularly with streaming and headphones, and quite a lot of people producing music in the box and not necessarily thinking about the relationships of working with others. But when you find that relationship that has its own momentum, that can go to the heart of being a really collaborative, creative sort of force, really. So, why? You probably don't know, actually. Maybe it's one of those things that, we just like each other and we get on with each other. I don't know about...
Well, I find, when we first started working together, he was, quite naive in the way of recording. He'd come from a very different background. He'd come from samples and very much from a music fan point of view. So he had no preconceived ideas of how it should be done, or what it should sound like in a way. But he was very sort of confused and a bit impressed. He sort of, because he didn't think that records, he didn't think recording could sound like it. I could make it sound like, it was a break. So one of his drum breaks off a record, we could do that and record live instruments and make them sound like that. And that was just a bit of a revelation for him. And he was just a bit like, oh, I didn't know you could record things like that. Obviously, you'd only ever seen, the SSL way of recording, where it all sounded a bit precise and a bit nice, and he didn't like it. He just used to keep saying, I want it to sound dusty. And and sort of grainy and all those sorts of things. And I was, mainly because didn't have a lot of choice at Chiswick Reach, it had to sound like that. But it was just set us on a path, basically, because I didn't actually know that much about James when I first started working with him. So it was before the internet was what it is today, so I couldn't even find out. So
it's okay. I'll work with him. It's interesting that mixture, because I was talking to Ali Staton, who used to work at the Fallout Shelter, and then he went on to work with Tricky, and it's pretty much the same combination, whereas Ali was very much, okay, these are how we're supposed to make a record, and then Tricky would come in with a bunch of records, different time signatures, different keys, and he's like, I'll just put them all together. I like that bit, and that bit. Can you make them all together? And at first Ali was like, do I tell him it's in the wrong key and it's a different tempo? He's like, okay, I'll make it work. Just thinking, how do we make these sounds come together? And sometimes it works, and sometimes it's like, oh, this is really bad. But I suppose it's that exploration, isn't it, of two different mindsets coming together.
Yeah, and it was just, it was a marrying of his world sonically, and sort of the more, I was used to more recording bands and that side of things, which he didn't really have any knowledge of at the time. So, I think South, I think, was a band called South, which we did 20 years ago today. Was a really good example of that combination of band and the attitude of making a sample-based record, but doing it with a band. And that was a really good combination. It had been quite intense up to that point. We did South and Sexy Beast in the same sort of session, and then I think we had a few years off for each other after that. And then another chap I've been working with called Ant was he met James somewhere else and just sort of said, "Oh, do you know James Lavelle?" And I was like, "Yes." Yeah. So I think we're going to do a record with him. I was like, "Okay." So and then that was back into Never Neverland,
right? Okay,
which we did, which was the time we just doing what we do. We didn't really think about it, but it was quite a not cutting edge. I think it was the sort of very that blending of breakbeat and band that was kind of one of the you just sort of realise you're actually quite at the front of the pack when but you don't realise that until sort of like 10 years later.
Oh yeah, absolutely, because as you said, we're just doing what we do. So, it is generally in retrospect, isn't it, where you go, blimey, okay.
Oh yeah.
So if we then obviously, so you go from there. Obviously, you're now established, but then some of your credits are like Adele, Grace Jones, Amy Winehouse. How did you then move into not being rude, but more mainstream? Because obviously James and Uncle is quite what people would regard as left field.
But they're all sort of came from the same sort of source of people, if you like. I tend to attach myself to people rather than genres or types of music. It's kind of so. The same guy who co-produced the Never Neverland and also met Ivor Guest, who was at the time just writing with Grace Jones. So they decided to, Grace should make a record. So got involved with that through that. And they just sort of Grace refers to it as the octopus. There's one arm comes out, another arm comes out. So where we had the room up at Tickle, Jimmy Hogarth was on the other side. Right. He was doing a lot of pop stuff, a lot of pop writing at the time. And literally the Amy Winehouse thing was, hey, I've got this track, you want to mix it? And it was like, yeah, and then I just mixed it and helped him out, and we just did it and submitted it, and everyone liked it, so it went on. Didn't really think much about it at the time. But that moved into working on Sia with Jimmy. So Jimmy was producing that. And that was a really good record to do. Yeah. It was a good fun record to do. And Sam Dixon, who was the bass player on Sia then, he was producing Adele. So that sort of comes to that then.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Though the connections.
Yeah. Just like one step after the other.
Yeah, it is. I mean, again, it's going back to the sort of social relationships of not only just making music, but how you then get asked to do things, how you end up working with people, which again, I think is something that people don't, I'm not having a go at the internet generation, but people don't tend to realise it. We have all this amazing technology where we can do things really quickly. For instance, you're mixing a record in lockdown with the artist basically sitting next to you, but virtually.
Screen over there.
Yeah, which is astonishing and wonderful, but a lot of things haven't changed. So it's like, if you work with this person, then through happenstance, they're like, oh, I know this person, and this is Cameron, and they say, oh, you're that Cameron. And before you know it, you get this sort of momentum thing, don't you, where you can move from Uncle through to Adele.
Yeah.
Which, is definitely non-genre specific pathway.
But there is a link between James and Adele as well, where he introduced, I think it was, I can't remember his name now, it was Nick Hubbard to XL, and he's the one that signed Adele to XL. So it's the octopus.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the MPG. So for, Music Producers Guild, I mean, some of the, I imagine quite a few of the viewers and listeners won't be aware of what the MPG is and why it is. Because, you're the executive director of it, aren't you?
Yeah, there's 5 executive directors. We all have an equal responsibility on the board for it. We just happen to have different areas we look after. So, some of the other area guys might look after more the promotional side of things. My area happens to be UK music and the more political side of it, along with Olga Fitzroy, who I roped in. It was getting a bit much for me.
Yeah.
We volunteer, and it's a lot of work, and it was all getting a bit much. So we coerced her into being my co-op at UK Music, and she's running with it, which is great.
Right, brilliant.
So it's sort of mutating a little bit. Even I've been on it doing it for 4 years now, and originally it was sort of a lot of it was sort of set up for more community and that side of it. But there's also so much of that happens outside of the MPG now that that's not really a big part of it. And it is very much into lobbying and looking out for our community basically. When I first started UK Music, I don't think anyone even knew what an engineer was. It felt like they didn't anyway. And I literally just sat there and put my hand up in the meetings and sort of go, and the producers, when that'd all be going on about artists and this and what, I'd be like, and the producers. And after a year or so of that, I had to start to include it in the thing.
Yeah.
And up until the summer party, which is the big party just last year, because they just gone. It was nearly a year ago now. We had speeches get up by all the main political parties, and they all mentioned producers and engineers in their thing, and I was like, okay, not my work is done, but it's just kind of like at least I know who we are now, and now in this particular crisis, I was actually very busy on a record, but Olga, as I said, was running with it. and lobbying very hard, and sort of it's no coincidence that the Chancellor mentioned musicians and engineers in his speech about the self-employed, because that was very much Olga being very present.
Yeah. I mean that's fantastic. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, it's not. I mean, a lot of dialogue I see on social media as well, where people are talking, we need to raise money for musicians because they've had to cancel all these tours, and you think, yeah, okay, but what about all the touring crew? What about all the tech crew? What about the bus crews, the PA crews, the agents, the promoters, the people who work at the venues, the festivals? So to then to widen the dialogue from people just thinking, oh, music is made by artists, or music is performed by artists. Because I'm sure a lot of people have, as you said, UK music, when you started, had no idea what an engineer was, or probably didn't. And I think a lot of people just seem to think that concerts just happen. They just happen,
How do I put it? It's kind of, especially at the moment, there's a lot of it is trying to get people to focus on the wider industry. Everyone knows that artists aren't playing, but very few people know that behind that artist is a whole bunch of people who have had their income cut to zero.
Yeah.
And for the foreseeable, I don't envisage any sort of gigs until the end of the year, really.
No.
And if you consider some of the medium to larger gigs are planned so far in advance that people are looking at next summer now, and they're not really. They've just written off the whole season.
Yeah, it's not like, particularly if you look at the festivals, it's not like, oh well, let's rebook the festival and do it in November. It's like, well, if it's outdoors, it's not going to work, particularly if it's in the UK. Yeah. But again, it is all those things. I don't know. For instance, a guy that you have worked with, Tom Grennan, who's a friend of mine as well, and obviously he's had his new single came out today, so he would have been out doing all his promo shows and actually been on tour. So now it's been sort of squashed down to tweeting about it, which is, he's got a lot of followers, but then getting it played on Radio 1 and what have you. But the way then people tend to, the way the artists and then the people who've got the points on the record, would be then people out playing it with the tickets, with the merchandise, because obviously a lot of people consume music for free now as well. So it's like you have to have a lot of build-up to turn that into any remuneration. So obviously the impact of the lockdown COVID-19 is across the board for anyone involved in music is difficult. Even like radio pluggers, for instance.
Like I said, I just finished mixing the Katie Mello record, and they were due to go out in September. So they're in but across Europe. So that's the other thing is I feel for the managers at the moment having to try and figure out that, because it's hard enough to know what's happening in the UK, let alone what's going to be happening in France or in Germany or in Spain, or all these different territories they need to deal with. So so I'm not sure what stage they're at with that. But that's a record that's just being mastered today.
Right. Okay.
So that's probably out in end of August, September, I suppose.
Yeah.
Meant to coincide with the tour.
Of course, yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose on the one hand of it, that it will give the fans or the people who've got the record a chance to have listened to it for a long time before the artist, when they're promoting it, just the record's only been out normally for a month and then they're on tour. And it's the bit where you're on stage and you go, and here's a new song. And people are like, can you play an old one? So I suppose it will give people a chance to actually really get into it. I'm just trying to look for. I'm looking for silver linings here. So obviously, you're known as a producer, engineer, and a mixer.
I would say mainly, engineer, mixer. I do occasionally produce things, but to be fair, I don't think my role actually changes that much, other than the name.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when you're asked so a project you haven't engineered, you haven't produced, you haven't engineered, but you just asked to mix it. Obviously, now you'll be sent all the files, and hopefully the playlists are in the right order, so you don't have to search for the correct guitar solo on playlist 16 because it wasn't put on playlist 1. The typical sort of vagaries of it, but that's a totally different mindset of dealing with sounds that you haven't put together.
Yeah, it can be. Sometimes they just kind of want it the same but better, which is always a tricky one.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just like, just go for it, do your thing, and that they tend to be a bit more fun. And sometimes, like with Katie, it was a lot of exploration as to what it should be. Yeah. Speaking of James, still Lavelle phoning.
Funny.
So, yeah, it was a lot of exploring. So, I got it and did what I thought, and she was like, no, it sounds great, but it's not really what I want. It's like, okay. And then we sort of went through it and figured out what she wanted, and then that didn't really agree with the producer. So
right, okay.
And then there was a lot of backwards and forwards, and it was good in that it was good, and that we had the time and the time to do it and to get it to the where it was right and where she was happy with it. So
right. That's really interesting, though, the time thing on the Katie record.
Well, we started off. It's meant to be done quickly, and then it obviously wasn't. So, but I started off. Yeah, I share this studio with Ivor, and he had a big film thing to do. So I decamped to Metropolis, and I was one of the production rooms there for a little while. And then the Corona thing hit. So Ivor took off to the country where he could work on it out there. And then I set up here with Katie doing it remotely. So
yeah.
It was we talked about the phases of the record. We sort of had phase 1, phase 2, sort of phase 3.
Brilliant.
It was it was just good to be able to go into that much detail on a record, and it turned out quite different to how we all thought it was going to be. And then which I think has sort of made it probably a more sophisticated record than it was going to be. So
right, okay,
which is good.
Yeah, well, having that sort of exploration, particularly when, as you said, it turned out differently than everyone was envisioning, is one. Well, it's one of the wonders of music, as well as one of the magics of music. Why it's an art and not just it's a commodity. It will sound like this. It's actually, well, we thought it was going to sound like this, but wow, it's totally. we certainly weren't expecting this at the start.
Yeah. So there was some amusing moments because we had she knows Bob Ezrin quite well, so he was on the mix review committee, if you like, and the producer and me and the manager, and it was just quite funny us just trying to get all these different opinions, and then just sort of trying to sift through them and sort of try to come up with something that sort of pleased everyone.
Yeah.
And occasionally Katie just go, no, we'll just ignore that, I think.
Yeah, it's my record. It's my name on it. Yeah.
Pull the artist card.
Yeah. Well, once in a while they are. It is actually helpful, isn't it? Particularly when there's a lot of people saying no, but yeah, but no, but, and it's like, hang on, it's my name on it. So, orchestras.
Yes,
You've worked quite a lot with orchestras, which is, with itself, is a lot of moving parts. Or even if they're all in the same, even if they're all sitting down, I mean, it's a different thing to pull together than a band or James Lavelle with some samples to move to the scale of an orchestra, but have to do it obviously quite quickly because of
Yeah.
time and finance pressure of having an orchestra.
Like I say, with orchestras, like I said, I grew up just doing whatever came along. You know, we're doing jingles during the day, and then film stuff in the evening, or and then albums on the weekends. It was just whatever was thrown at you, you just got on and did. And recording orchestras was one of those things that just got thrown at you. You just did it. So it was never really intimidating from that point of view. And I think especially with orchestras, all the work is and should be done before you even get there. So with most of the people I record orchestras with now, I kind of know what they want, but it's a lot of talking goes on before as to what you want it to sound like, and then what studio. The studio is just as much part of the instrument as the orchestra. So if you just get a bunch of string people in there, that's not really going to do what you want it to do. So you kind of got to talk about how they want it to sound.
Yeah. And
then call on your sort of knowledge bank to figure out how to get that, within the studio.
Yeah, it's interesting what you'd say about the studio as well, because a lot of people go, okay, orchestra, Abbey Road, Studio 2, which is kind of like the classic.
It is. That is the classic, and it does sound great, I must say.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of, if you're wanting a more sort of Motown-y sound, is probably not the best option. And I said all these studios have their personalities, and easy ways to describe it within the classic film composers that use those studios as well. So the Air is very much Hans Zimmer, and Studio One at Abbey Road is very much John Williams. It's just kind of that that makes it very easier for a lot of other people to kind of figure out what it's going to sound like. Olympic used to be a great room for a more I call it the Motown-y sort of sound, but more contained sort of sound.
Absolutely.
British Grove's kind of taken that place sonically now. And a lot of the people I work with are not going for that big, super cinematic sort of sound. They're going for a more traditional kind of, not traditional, but like a rock and roll sound.
Yeah.
So I use the old gear. Always have. So quite often I use the EMI desks at British Grove. It used to be at Olympic. And even if I go somewhere else, I'll still probably use more retro-y, for a better term, gear to do strings with.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because if you're not having a bunch of string samples which someone's arranged, if you're actually going to have an orchestra with all the extra parts as well, it's like, well, we want this because of the sound of an orchestra, so let's capture it. Obviously, then you've got all the different multifarious ways this can be integrated and mixed and all these things. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with Robert Kirby before he died, who was an amazing string arranger. He did all the early Nick Drake stuff, and a guy called Will Malone, and the Heritage Orchestra.
Will. I love Will. He's great.
Yeah, and the sound of him conducting the Heritage Orchestra on some Richard Ashcroft shows was, it's astonishing to have that. Is incredible, but working with obviously you were quite used to it, as you said. You would just do what was given. So, okay, jingle, then there's some film work, then it's a band. But people who have not worked with orchestras before, particularly engineers, and I know a lot of artists or A&R will say, oh, let's put an orchestra on it, without really thinking through the implications of it. But is it the mindset of having to engineer an orchestra?
It doesn't really change for me. No, it's like I said, most of the work's done beforehand. So unless something goes wrong, which it does do occasionally, then I find them quite chilled sessions because they're kind of like you've done all your prep. All you need to do is be quiet, organised, and just kind of go through and make sure you got the takes. And it's when something goes wrong that gets a bit stressful. But, but I find them quite relaxing.
Because I know some engineers will find it petrifying. They're like, oh my God.
Yeah, I think we did the string session for Trust, which was a big TV show, did with James. Will Malone arrangements. That it was great, and it was like I think it was a £70,000 day.
Whoa!
But I didn't. Obviously, I didn't. He didn't tell me that beforehand. But just because it was so much music for TV, it was kind of just the licensing figures and stuff like that are quite high when it gets up to that.
Yeah.
It was, like I say, if something goes wrong in those situations, I guess divide 70,000 by the 10 hours you're in there.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot of money
it is.
per second that you're chewing up when something goes wrong.
So in your your day-to-day stuff, engineering, mixing, is there a particular piece of kit that you tend to reach for that you would like, if it wasn't here, for instance, like a particular microphone or desk or whatever?
I used to be a lot more finicky about that. Not so much anymore, but I got I got some Telefunken preamps, which I love, and I struggle without them.
Right.
And I've got a rack of Neves, which are also good, but I think the Telefunkens would probably get used over them, mainly due to weight issues. The Neves are quite heavy.
Yeah.
But in a mixing scenario, not really. Just looking around the room, I've got a Bell Smart compressor that sits on my mix bus most of the time, and that's sort of about it hardware wise. Apart from but the preamps are all more recording and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was talking to a Two Door Cinema Club the other day, a couple of days ago, because they're part of the whole thing, and I just threw it at them. Three recordings that you're most proud of, which is a real, and they're like, oh, you can't do that. But so I did, so I'm going to throw it at you. And it could be for anything, any reason. It could be one of the first things you did, the last thing you did, whatever. Because then we can put links to them on Amazon, so then people go, oh, right, I want to listen to that.
I was going to say there's one what we talked about earlier, from the Sia record, that first Sia record, the Breathe Me song, which was quite proud of at the time, and still am.
Okay.
There was a Joe Strummer record, which was really good, and the Grace Jones one was great. Actually, the Bloodlight and Bammy, which was the film score we did, the Grace Jones thing, where we recorded they went to Dublin and they did 2 shows there, and we recorded those.
Right.
Quite pleased with how they turned out. So that was that was a pretty. Yeah, we set up in a kitchen. It was really kind of quite Heath Robinson to get it all done. No nice, luxurious OB truck. It was literally a bunch of gear in a kitchen.
Brilliant.
And pretty much mixed that off the laptop speakers.
Right. Okay.
At the end of it.
Wow.
And we just ran the whole show off, for everyone to listen to and stuff like that. And of course, everyone then gets used to those mixes. But the mixes changed very little from that laptop mix to what you heard in the cinema. So that was quite a quite an achievement, I thought.
I'd say that's a huge achievement, particularly for mixing on laptop speakers to then here you are in a surround sound cinema, and it's not that much different.
Frightened Rabbit, that was a really good one.
Okay, cool.
I like that one. Can't show favourites. Trying not to.
Brilliant. Okay, one last question, which is a bit of a downer, but I've been asking everyone. Is there something in your day-to-day life of engineering mixing that you wish you didn't have to deal with?
Sometimes, not MPG politics, but politics of, you can't do this because somebody else has got this, that side of it.
Right, yeah.
Is what sort of is the biggest downer for me, I suppose.
Yeah.
Not, no, it's not for reasons that artistic or musical.
Yeah.
It's for reasons of, political reasons that they can't do that because of somebody else's involvement or.
Yeah.
Those things are a bit of a downer.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you can do something great and then obviously it doesn't come out because somebody's involved with it or something else goes wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, it should all be about the music, not.
Well, absolutely, yeah. But again, it's like music is an art form, but then you've got the business side, which may love it, but it's a commodity, and so then there's the politics, and then this person's doing this, that person's that. And obviously, and particularly if it gets into intellectual property and then this and that, and it's like, whoa, okay. But in its core essence, it's an art form, and we do it because we love it.
Indeed.
Yeah. So what? It's been absolutely fantastic, and thank you so much. And by the way, you are the calmest man in pop, which I think is a good place to be, particularly with mixing a soundtrack on the laptop and then it's coming out through in cinemas.
Now, to be fair, I did have some speakers set up, and I did a little bit there, but then we had to. Obviously, they're packing down, so when I wasn't finished, so I then just took the laptop up to the band room and just kept finessing it up there, and then bounced it off and emailed it to everyone.
Wow, yeah, that's brilliant.
Thinking that was just be, there's just be the reference.
Yeah, yeah, it's a rough mix, just so you can see what it's like, Okay, no, we like it like that. Just let's do that. Well, Cameron, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And hopefully, we're not going to be socially distanced for too long.
Indeed.
And we can make some actual proper noise with other humans in the same room.
Yeah, with a real human, rather than just a sort of like a Zoom human over there on that screen. Yeah.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you so much, and thank you for your time. It's been fabulous.
Pleasure.
And hopefully see you in person in the not too distant future.
Indeed.